All right, guys, this is David. I just got back from the theater watching Fantastic Beasts 2, The Crimes of Grindelwald. I'm like kind of baffled by the movie that I just saw. I like kind of want to do a review of the movie, but I am like too busy. So instead, I'm literally just turning on my webcam and I'm going to kind of rant about this for a while. I think this movie was fascinatingly poorly put together, I guess is how I would say that. The scenes were fine for the most part. Like a scene would happen, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm fine with this. But it was around the point where basically like I could tell we were at the climax of the movie, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, nothing I watched matters really. Like none of these scenes came together to mean anything. I don't know why I watched them. Like if somebody came up to me and was like, hey David, what's Fantastic Beasts The Crimes of Grindelwald about? It looks like it's about some fantastic beasts and Grindelwald, his crimes. My response to that would be like, you fool, you buffoon. This movie is not about either of those things. Somebody was like, oh, well, what is it about then? I would say, yeah, good question. What is this movie about? I just have to get this out, these feelings out about this movie. So, spoiler alert. Can I start with? I'm going to start with things that I liked about this movie. I like the guy who could go into the wall, and he popped out, and I was like, oh, what? Other thing I liked that at Grindelwald's big rally, he's like showing off like nuclear bombs and like tanks from World War II. He's like, look at this is what the Muggles are gonna do, and there was like a palpable sense of fear on everybody's face, like even the heroes and people who you knew like weren't into what Grindelwald was saying, but at this moment you could see they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. So I thought that was well done. And then the third thing that I liked is actually Eddie Redmayne's performance. You know, when I saw the first one, I think I was younger and I was more cynical, and I was like, oh, this Eddie Redmayne, Newt Scamander, he's just some kind of like manic pixie dream girl, but like a guy version. He's just like this doing this forced, quirky. But watching this one, I think that the whole time I was like, oh, wait a minute, I think he's autistic. Like I think this is a deliberate character choice. I can understand a bit more about this guy, where he's coming from, kind of what his struggles are, which is good because the script doesn't have anything about that. So I thought that was cool. I thought that was well done. Oh, I thought that the lion, like the Chinese dragon, was cool. Oh, I like the zoo. I like his like zoo that is in his house. It had nothing to do with anything, but it was neat. So yeah, I think those were the list of things that I liked. Things I didn't like. I took notes during the movie, but it was so dark, it's all scribbles. I'm just gonna go through the movie in order. So like the movie starts with Grindelwald, played by Johnny Depp, and he's like in prison, and he's got like a magic bubble around him, and also his tongue has been cut out. So he can't work his magic tongue and like talk the guards into releasing him. And then also there's like an evil Gila monster that just kind of sits next to him. I can't tell if it's his pet. The first Fantastic Beasts movie was so unmemorable to me. I don't remember if they introduced that character or not, of a Gila monster. He's in this facility. It's like a Magneto facility where it's just like they have like all this magical security and things. We cut his tongue out. We did all these things. You know, he's so secure in here. And then some British wizard shows up and he's like, all right, we're going to move him upstate. He'll be perfectly contained in our magical carriage. So they bring him on a carriage and it's like, oh, hey, what do you know? He escapes. And his escape plan, I still don't know. I'm going to walk through this. Hopefully me saying this will make it make sense to me. So they put Grindelwald in this magical carriage and he's surrounded by dudes with wands, and the carriage takes off and it's in the middle of a storm, which seems like a bad idea. Very low visibility, and then there's one of the cops and he's like watching, and then the cop teleports underneath the carriage, like Robert De Niro in Cape Fear or Sideshow Bob in The Simpsons, if that's more your speed. So he's down there and then he turns into Grindelwald and you're like, oh no, the real Grindelwald was pretending to be a cop the whole time, which means why didn't he just like walk out the door? Why is the real Grindelwald trying to break out the fake Grindelwald? So then the fake Grindelwald is inside, and then he turns into the cop, and you're like, oh, so what's going on here? And then Grindelwald starts doing magic spells, and he's like, aha, I'm gonna turn you guys your stuff into snakes. And snakes are like attacking the wizards, and they're like, oh no, snakes. And he's like, also I do a spell that makes your wands disappear. And they're like, oh, my wands. He's like, also the Gila monster attack. So maybe it is his pet, I don't know. They're like, oh no, a Gila monster. And he's like, aha, I'm gonna fill up the carriage with water and drown you in there. They're like, oh no, we can't breathe. And I'm just like, what is the point of this? Is not interesting to me. Like, and this is the big villain moment of like, ooh, this is what he's capable of. It's like, apparently he's capable of just like whatever. He can just do whatever he wants, which is not actually interesting from a storytelling perspective. I mean, I know that like Harry Potter fans, I know he's got like the Elder Wand and he can like do whatever he wants. Like there's an in-universe reason that he can just out magic anybody without breaking a sweat. But I don't care. Like, that's not interesting to me. Like, you're totally free to write a character who's just like, and then he did whatever he wanted, and there was absolutely no struggle, and that's it. Like, I want to see the character have to plan or scheme or like be crafty or outmaneuver people or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, do something. But instead he's just like, yeah, I'll do that, and I'll do that, and you're flooded now, and snakes, and whatever. It's so boring. I did not care at all, and I cannot tell you what the point of that scene is, because as far as I can tell, Grindelwald already escaped. Like, he had his tongue and everything, so I don't know why he had to, like, go back and take the carriage. Like, was he trying to take for people who saw it, was he trying to get the pendant? Is that what it was? Like, the pendant that had the blood oath in it? Or whatever. It's Harry Potter. Because nobody seemed to even know what that thing was. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like there was easier ways. I don't know. It didn't mean... The scene was basically meaningless. So this movie's called The Crimes of Grindelwald, and Grindelwald, like, does not show up again until basically the end. Like, he's there. Like, he'll be in the background. He'll, like, say something vaguely menacing. The movie has nothing to do with him at that point. So I hear you asking, well then, David, if the movie's not about the crimes of Grindelwald, then it must be about the Fantastic Beasts, right? Except that the Fantastic Beasts are basically just cosmetic. So the plot of this movie basically is Dumbledore shows up to Newt Scamander and he's like, Newt, Ezra Miller is out in Paris and he needs to be rescued. We need to get to him before Grindelwald gets to him, because he'll seduce him to the dark side of magic. And Newt's like, well, I don't know about that. I don't really take sides. I just walk and talk with the animals. And Dumbledore's like, one day, Newt, you will take sides. And, you know, it's kind of like, ooh, is this his character arc? Is this what this movie's going to be about? Is this guy who doesn't really take sides, he's going to have to learn the value of standing up for what's right or something like that? And it's like, no, that's not actually what the movie's about, but that's something he says, though, so there you go. Really, the whole plot is just all of these coincidences and contrivances. So, like, his friend shows up, his muggle friend, with Queenie from the first movie, and they're like, look at us, we're in England, because we got a letter about how my sister is in Paris and we're stopping here or something. And then she gets in a fight with the muggle friend. She's like, I want to get married. And he's like, that's illegal. I'm not magic and you are. And she's like, I hate you now. And she's like, I'm going to teleport to Paris without you. And then the muggle friend is like, oh, Newt Scamander, Queenie went to Paris to be with her sister. And he's like, I'm in love with her sister. Let's go to Paris. So they go to Paris, which also is where Ezra Miller was, remember? But he's not going there to look for Ezra Miller. Like, he's going there to look for the sister he's in love with, who hates him because she read in a tabloid that he was getting engaged to Zoe Kravitz, but it was a misprint. Like, the entire plot of this movie is basically predicated on there was a misprint in the newspaper, and now Newt Scamander has to go and, like, set the record straight that he's not with Zoe Kravitz, his brother is, but, like, they mixed up the names in the tabloid. Who cares? I don't know why a tabloid's even reporting on this. God, this movie's so tedious to talk about. So Newt's like, I'm gonna go fix this. So he goes to Paris with the muggle friend. And luckily, the sister, her job is that she's looking for Ezra Miller too. It turns out that literally the entire cast is either looking for Ezra Miller or looking for somebody who's looking for Ezra Miller, which creates the illusion that there's like a cohesive plot going on instead of just random like coincidences that brings characters together. Ezra Miller, this whole time, like he ran away and joined a French circus where he works in a freak show, like a wizard freak show. And I'm like, what is the bar exactly for what qualifies as freaky to a wizard exactly? And there are some fantastic beasts on display because, like, there you go, there's your fantastic beasts. Like, they're in the circus, they don't mean anything, but it's like, look at these monsters, isn't that what you guys came for? Among them is this Korean woman who has been cursed to turn into a snake, which is something that wizards already do. Like, Harry's dad could do that. Like, lots of people. Professor McGonagall turns into a cat. It's like the first magic thing we see in the entire series. Like, people turning into animals is not a freak show occurrence. No, the freak show element is that the guy's like, one day she won't be able to turn back into a person. The wizards in the crowd are like, whoa, oh my goodness. It's like, okay, guys, chill. Like, you can turn rats into cups or whatever. Your lives are much more interesting than whatever this guy's peddling. So anyway, this woman can turn to a snake, and her name is Nagini, which is the name of the snake that Voldemort owns in the original Harry Potter books. So it's like, oh, that snake was a Korean woman the whole time. What a rich world you've built for us, JK. You're answering the hard-hitting questions the fans wanted to know. Now, the only thing that's kind of redeemable about that particular element is that Voldemort turns that snake into his Horcrux, and Voldemort only makes Horcruxes out of things that have some significance to important people. So, like, I guess she's going to be significant to somebody that Voldemort considers important down the line. Maybe even Ezra Miller, because Ezra Miller, it turns out, is in love with her, and he's got a scheme to break her out of the circus, which is like, is she a slave? Do wizards have slaves? Are they not just allowed to leave? I don't think I ever got the sense that there was slavery in Harry Potter, among humans at least. So they break out, and in the process of breaking out, they release a literal, like, Chinese-looking dragon. Like, it's got a lion face, and it, like, takes off, tearing through the streets of France in the middle of the night. And people are, like, running, screaming. And the circus guy's like, we gotta get out of here now. And then, like, cut to the next day, and Newt Scamander shows up. He's, like, got his little nifflers. Nifflers are, if you're wondering, they're basically, like, the evil corporate version of the Porgs from Star Wars. Wow, they got obnoxious immediately. The movie will just, like, stop dead in its tracks to be like, and now it's time for some nifflers, folks. Like, or some other fantastic beasts. Like, check out what they're up to right now. We put them in the title. J.K. Rowling decided that this entire prequel franchise would be named after him, so we have to shoehorn him in from here on out, guys. Sorry. So one of these little evil Porgs is looking for clues, and Newt Scamander's like, there was a fantastic beast here last night, a big old dragon with a lion for a face. And it's like, yeah, did that massive monster that tore through the streets of France, nobody's talking about it. There's no panic or a sense of urgency or anything. He's like, yep, there's a giant dragon loose somewhere in one of these streets. All night it was out. So, but no, it never comes up. He finds the sister, the girl he's, like, in love with. She has been kidnapped by this random dude who his eyes have tentacles in them. And then Newt gets kidnapped too. And they're all kidnapped. And then the dude with tentacles in his eyes, he passes out. And they're like, great, now we're all kidnapped here. This is some rescue, Newt. And then, like, a little stick monster crawls over and, like, lets him out of the cage. They're like, aha, that was easy. And I was like, that was easy. I was kind of hoping for maybe, I don't know, a story element or something to happen here. So instead they just, like, open the cage, and they're like, this guy's got tentacles in his eyes. And Newt's like, I know all about tentacled things. They're like in a dungeon. Then immediately cut to the streets of France again. It's the middle of the night. This giant dragon is, like, still tearing through the city. Everyone's freaking out. And Newt is suddenly standing in the middle of the street. There's a crowd around him, and he's like, I've got this one, folks. And I'm like, are you telling me that this thing was rampaging through France all day? Nobody mentioned it? Like, it feels like this was supposed to be the same night that the thing got out. And Newt is just, like, down the street or something. Like, it feels like the movie immediately cut back to the scene with the lion face dragon. But then they were like, oh no, we should put this later. We're going to reorganize this a bit, and we're going to put, like, a whole other day in between. It's so weirdly edited. Something had to have happened behind the scenes. So he saves this dragon. He, like, puts it in his magical sack of tricks or whatever, and, like, has to, like, wrestle it to establish dominance or whatever. And you're like, ooh, an action scene. Oh, these fantastic beasts. Oh boy. Anyway, a bunch of stuff happens. Like Queenie's like I can't find my sister, and I'm like, and she's just like in the streets of Paris, like, where's my sister? And I'm like, you guys are magic people. You're just homeless in France. Like, why don't you teleport back home? Go like call where she works. She's like, what am I gonna do? I'm stuck in France. I'm like, you people are magic. Why don't you teleport? That's another big problem I got with this whole franchise is that in Harry Potter, these were children who knew the most basic spells, and like as the series went on, they learned more and more. But there were so many limitations on them. It was fun getting to see how they would like maneuver around the limitations that adults had set and their own limited knowledge and trying to like apply these things to solve their problems. But when you remove that and you're like, no, they're all adults, they can basically do whatever they want. It's like, oh, well, that kind of removes the fun or the suspense of watching magic. So anyway, Queenie's like wandering the streets, like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. And then like one of Grindelwald's henchwomen is like, why don't you come hang out with me? And she's like, okay. And then Grindelwald's there and he's like, and it's Johnny Depp, who's like giving the most boring performance. I don't care what anybody says. Like, he's so boring in this movie. And he's like, you want to marry a muggle, don't you? And she's like, oh yeah, gee whiz, I do. He's like, if I'm in charge, we can do whatever we want. And she's like, oh, well, sounds good to me. I like, maybe I'll join you. Random stuff happens. Like, Nicholas Flamel is in the movie, and he's like got the Sorcerer's Stone like on his shelf. And then they go, like, Ezra Miller the whole time is like, I'm an orphan. I'm just driven. Who is my mom? I gotta find out who I am. Which is like, fine, go for it. And then all of a sudden there's like this giant like tarp floods through the streets of Paris, and they're like, what's this giant tarp? And they're like, oh, this is Grindelwald is telling people like it's starting, like Grindelwald is announcing to the world that he's here. It's like, with a tarp? Why is there a tarp covering everything? It's like a magic tarp, I guess. Like, it's a little kind of transparent, like, cool, but the tarp's got like a raven on it or something. Am I missing something? What is the significance of this? And like, again, like, never brought up again. Nobody mentions it. Like, the fact that a massive magical blanket covers the entire city. So basically everybody's like, all right, I guess we should wrap this up. We should wrap this movie up. Let's go find Ezra Miller. And they're like, well, where is he even going to be? They're like, well, he's probably going to go to the records and find out who his family is. And they're like, well, let's go there too. And they go to the records, and Zoe Kravitz goes to the records, and Newt Scamander's brother, whose fiance is Zoe Kravitz, goes to the records. Everybody's like going to the records, and the records are like, the records have been moved to the haunted cemetery where Grindelwald is having his meeting. So like they're all like in the French Ministry of Magic, and all these magic cats show up, and they're like, oh no, it's the French security system. How are we going to get out of here? And Newt's like, remember that dragon I captured like a Pokemon? Well, he can teleport. He's going to teleport the entire main cast to the haunted cemetery of Zoe Kravitz's ancestors. So then like everybody goes there. Ezra Miller, Zoe Kravitz, Newt Scamander, the girl, the Muggle guy, the dude, tentacle eye man. And Ezra Miller is like, now that the whole cast is in one place, can we finally tell me who am I? Who's my mysterious family? I think that I'm related to Zoe Kravitz and the Lestranges. And the dude with the tentacles in his eyes is like, he's like, yes, you're my long lost half brother. I'm Zoe Kravitz's half brother also. We forgot to mention that before. It all started when my mother was mind controlled by the Lestrange man, and he raped her. Then I was born, and then he did it again to somebody else, and Zoe Kravitz was born, and then he did it again and you were born, but he only ever loved you, and I swore that I would kill you to punish him. And then you and Zoe Kravitz were giving up as orphans, and now I found you and I'm gonna kill you. And Zoe Kravitz is like, no, that's not what really happened. And it's this awkward. It's like an entire other movie is explained just by the characters standing around. Zoe Kravitz is like, that's not the whole truth. I'll tell you the whole truth. We were sent to the orphanage. I hated you, Ezra Miller, because you were crying so much. Except that it wasn't really you, Ezra Miller. It was my real brother who I swapped you out for because you actually didn't cry. And then my real brother, he was a baby. He drowned on a ship, and I killed him. And Ezra Miller is like, will somebody tell me, who am I? I don't care about any of this. And Grindelwald is like, I'll tell you who you are. And he's like, finally, I join you, Grindelwald. And then like on the other side of the door of this crypt is like a massive like wizard neo-Nazi rally. And Grindelwald is like, yo, everybody, it's finally time for me to show up again and be important to the plot. And he gives a speech about like, let's not kill the muggles, let's enslave them. And everybody's like, ooh, what a measured position you present here, Grindelwald. And Queenie is like, yes, I like this. It's completely out of left field for her, but fine, she's down with it. Grindelwald's like, yep, and everybody should join me before the muggles invent the atomic bomb. And then Grindelwald like makes a wall of fire, and then he's like, I got this magic blue fire, and anybody who passes through it joins me and joins the dark side. And anybody who hasn't joined the dark side is going to burn up and die. And it's this moment like all the characters have to either like enter and join him or stand their ground in defiance. A bunch of characters die and other ones turn evil. I don't feel like any of these moments were earned for these characters. The Muggle guy is like, Queenie, you can't join Grindelwald. I thought we were going to get married. And she's like, this is the only way we can get married, is if I join the guy who specifically said he wants to enslave you and everybody like you. It's like, okay, that doesn't really track, lady. Like, I see what you're going for, JK, but this is pretty weak. And Ezra joins. He's like, I just want to know who my family is. And it's like, all right, Ezra, you know what? That's like literally the only deal to your entire character. So like, fine, like you join the bad guy too. And then other people, like Zoe Kravitz dies for no reason. It's like, oh, good representation. And then Nicholas Flamel shows up and he's like, don't you understand? You all have to do magic. And I was like, yeah, that's a very good point. They're like, oh, magic. Of course. So they all do magic and they stop the fire. And then Newt Scamander turns to his brother and he goes, I think I've chosen my side. And I'm like, what? Is that the lesson you learned from all of this? Like, I'm glad. Like, that's a good lesson to learn. But at exactly what point triggered your transformation? Like, I feel like stories are about characters facing obstacles, overcoming them, and either changing themselves or learning how to change the world. I don't see when he actually learned those things. Like, was it when Zoe Kravitz died and he was like, oh, come on. Oh, this sucks. And then Ezra Miller goes to Grindelwald. Grindelwald's like, it's time for me to tell you who you are. You're Dumbledore's brother. And he's all like, ah! And he like does magic at a mountain, and the mountain, I think it exploded. And the audience goes, oh my god, it's Dumbledore's brother. Another one. Apparently this doesn't mean very much because it had nothing to do with the Harry Potter books, which take place later, so I don't care. I don't even know. I have no faith in Warner Brothers. You know what this movie felt like? This movie felt like Suicide Squad, where like things just kind of happen. It's not as bad as Suicide Squad is like an awful movie. Or it reminds me of like Batman vs. Superman, where it's like eventually this will become important and this movie will become worth watching retroactively once we establish an entire franchise. And of course, all these movies are by Warner Brothers, who I have zero faith in anymore. I don't think that they know how to make franchise films. They just drop the ball over and over again. Yeah, I feel like I got all that out of my system. This movie was a bunch of random things happened. The characters, their flaws, the things that they're trying to overcome are never mirrored on any larger scale the way that they are in most good stories or in like Harry Potter stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you've got the Goblet of Fire, which is about Harry Potter learning that he has to like face challenges on his own. Like, he's got a support system, but at the end of the day, it's him on his own. And that's mirrored by the larger sort of plot of having to learn to face Voldemort on his own. That like ultimately it's going to come down to the two of them. Or in Order of the Phoenix, where Harry's feeling like angsty and rebellious and starting to like Dumbledore's army, which is important on a larger scale because the adults aren't doing anything. So there's this kind of like youthful rebellion versus like older complacency, like stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like the plot, the larger world that the characters inhabit is just a device to mirror what the characters themselves are going through. Frodo slowly travels from the idyllic Shire into hell on earth Mordor. It feels like the real story is Grindelwald seducing various characters, like showing how regular people can be seduced by fascism. And I would have loved to have watched that movie. It felt like that movie was going on in the background of the movie we actually got, which was about nothing, really. It wasn't about anything. It claimed to be about things. It claimed to be about, how do we decide how to take sides and things like that. But I never saw scenes where characters had to wrestle with those issues. I mean, there are definitely scenes where a character will say it, but I mean, we see no consequences for their actions. There's implied consequences like, in the next movie, this is going to be important. But it's like, that's not a story. That's a commercial. I don't know. This movie has kind of left me exhausted. So that's that. Harry Potter, man. I don't know. I just kind of feel tired, to be honest.